I know the feeling. You scroll through endless listings, see a gorgeous picture of a guitar that looks like it could be a piece of art, add it to your cart, and then when it finally lands in your case the neck feels off, the tone is thin, or the tremolo just won't stay in tune. That's why I'm doing this deep dive on the Ibanez premium AZ427P2QM 7-string, because it's easy to end up with a pretty-looking instrument that doesn't fit the way you actually play. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent a good amount of time looking at how this guitar stacks up in real-world scenarios, from bedroom practice to gig night stage runs, so you can decide if it's worth the risk of committing to a 7-string at this price point. First off, let's talk about the category itself. 7-string guitars have become a staple for modern metal, prog, and some jazz players who need that extra low B without having to drop tune a 6-string. The trade-off is always something like added neck width, slightly heavier feel, and the need for a pickup set that can handle both the low thump and the high-end clarity. The Ibanez Premium Series aims to hit that sweet spot by pairing a basswood body with a maple neck, a rosewood fingerboard, and 2 humbucking pickups, all under a Gotoh tremolo bridge. Those pieces are all reputable on paper, but the real question is how they behave when you actually crank the amp to 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I started by looking at the body wood. Basswood is known for a balanced response-tight lows, decent mids, and a smooth top end, especially when you're not dealing with extreme gain. In my own testing, the AZ427P2QM held the low B surprisingly tight, even when I dropped down to a drop A riff. The note didn't turn into a flabby rumble like you sometimes get from a cheap poplar body. Instead, it stayed articulate enough to sit under a palm-muted chug while still letting the higher strings sing. That makes the guitar viable for rhythm-heavy metal where the low end needs to be both powerful and defined. The Rosewood fingerboard is another practical detail that matters when you're spanning 8 frets across a 7-string neck. Rosewood gives a slightly warmer feel compared to ebony, which can be a blessing for players who spend hours on fast legato runs. I found the fingerboard radius comfortable for both tight shredding and chordal work. When I tried a jazz fusion voicing that stretched across the low B and the upper strings, the neck didn't feel cramped, and the string spacing allowed for clean finger placement without a lot of fiddling. That said, if you have particularly small hands, the extra width can still be a challenge. There's no denying the neck is broader than a typical 6-string, and that can make quick position shifts feel a bit slower until you adapt. Now, the pickups. Ibanez equipped the AZ427P2QM with 2 humbuckers that sit in a classic HH configuration. In a live setting, I ran them through a high-gain amp and a pedal board that included an overdrive and a noise gate. The bridge humbucker delivered a tight, aggressive bite that sliced cleanly through distortion, while the neck humbucker gave a fuller, more rounded tone that worked well for clean passages and melodic leads. What's practical here is the lack of a middle pickup. You only have to switch between 2 tonal palettes, which simplifies live changes. If you need a more nuanced mid-range option, you might feel limited, but for most metal or progressive contexts those 2 voices cover the majority of the sonic ground you'll need. The Gotoh tremolo is where a lot of the real-world testing comes in. Many guitars with floating bridges suffer from tuning instability after aggressive dive bombs or heavy string bending. The Gotoh unit on this Ibanez feels solid. Its knife-edge pivot points and fine-tuner adjustments let you lock the bridge fairly well. I did a series of tremolo tricks that involved pulling the bar down an entire half step and then releasing, repeated several times in a row. The guitar stayed within about 510 cents of pitch, which is acceptable for most live situations, especially if you're using a tuner pedal. It's not a locking system like a Floyd Rose, but for a player who wants some vibrato expression without the extra complexity, it's a decent compromise. One practical weakness I noticed is the string tension. Because the instrument is a 7-string with a standard scale length, the low B can feel looser than on a setup designed specifically for extended range. If you like to use very heavy gauge strings for extra tightness, you might need to adjust the truss rod and possibly the bridge saddles to compensate. For a beginner or a player who expects the low B to feel as taut as a 6-string high E, there could be an adjustment period. It's not a defect, just something you need to be aware of before you dive in. Who should consider buying this guitar? If you're already comfortable on a 6-string, have some experience with wider necks, and you